Hey, Travis, welcome to the show.
Hey Shannon, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Would you just say hello to everybody listening and let them know who you are?
Hey everyone, my name's Travis Gatzemeier. I'm a certified financial planner. I'm the owner of Kinetics Financial Planning, which is a fee-only financial planning firm and investment management firm based out of Texas, but I do work virtually with clients around the country and specialize with stock compensated employees. So those that have restricted stock units, stock options, ESPP, things like that as part of their income, and also entrepreneurs. So really focusing on folks that have, maybe one or two employees and solopreneurs that are doing the entrepreneurial journey and struggling with their finances or just trying to get a good financial plan in place because there's a ton of things that entrepreneurs have to navigate with finances.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can you just explain what fee only is for those who don't understand that term?
Sure. Yeah. Fee only is this basically means when I'm compensated, my business and myself are compensated for the work I'm doing for clients. The only way I'm compensated is through my clients. So I don't get any kind of kickbacks from commissions, insurance, partnerships, anything like that. So just to give you an example, like if I'm analyzing an insurance policy for a client and we need to get additional life insurance, I go refer that out to someone that I trust to get that policy in place, and I don't get the commission for it. Therefore, there's not much of a conflict of interest for me to get the biggest policy in place as possible. We're going to get the right policy in place. So technically, in short, it's just everything that comes to me from compensation is directly from my client.
Love that. And would you recommend people look for someone who's fee only in order to maintain, no conflict of interest and things like that?
I do recommend it. There's a lot of good planners out there and financial advisors that aren't fee only. So it's really just about asking the right questions, making sure they're fiduciary, making sure that you're getting the good advice. In the end, as long as you're confident and you're getting really good advice, it doesn't matter how they're paid necessarily. I just decided to go fee only because in my past life, where I worked at the financial planning firm I worked at was very heavily insurance focused. And I saw a lot of things go wrong because of that, the drive to get commissions from insurance products, right? So they're used in my opinion, a lot of those products like that are used kind of badly within a financial plan. So I decided to go the fee only route where there was but there was less conflicts of interest.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned that you do a lot of work with employees, with entrepreneurs. What got you passionate about this particular specialty and wealth planning and financial planning in general? Like financial professionals, I always love hearing the origin story because typically we're not growing up as little second graders going, I want to be a financial planner. So where did that kind of come from and how did you become passionate about it?
Yeah, there's not like one thing that really, like you said, like, hey, I want to do this financial planning thing. But it was really that, early on, I always wanted to run my own business and have the most flexibility. I didn't know what that would look like. So just there was something in me that was like, hey, I want to run my own thing. And after college, I got in, I actually interned at a large brokerage firm and then worked there for a number of years. And that got me interested in like finances and just learning the lingo and figuring out how you can actually like put money into investments and make money with money. That's super cool. And that just kind of all came down to like, now I can help people do the same things, but not just that, but helping them make the right financial decisions. And that led me into, hey, I can actually do this and work with people all over the place and not be tied down to one location and run my own business, start my own business. So started the business back in 2000. So it's been a couple of years now and definitely growing. And then like what you mentioned, like working with people in a certain, have certain situations like equity compensation and entrepreneurs, right? I feel like for myself, like a small firm, you have to have some kind of like specialty, or you're just going to be very general and you're going to be working on tons of different things, right? You're going to have someone that's retired, business owner, equity comp person. You're just going to have someone that's W2. And when you have all these different situations, it's very difficult to be really good, right? And I do a lot of content marketing as well. So from everything from working with my clients to generating content, if I can kind of hone in on these like two areas, I'd like to get it to one eventually, but like two areas, gives me a lot more specialty and allows me to work a lot better with my clients. So what I did was kind of looked at the areas that I liked planning. And most of my clients had some kind of equity or they had self-employment income or they were an entrepreneur. And I was like, wow, I really like those two aspects. And surprisingly, there's a ton of overlap between planning with the two. So a couple of years ago, I just decided, hey, I'm only going to take on clients that kind of fit within these two areas, right? And that's where we're at.
Awesome. And, on this show and in general, we love it when people can simplify the type of complex topics that surround financial planning, because it feels like the Wild West, because everybody's giving different advice on social media and people are hearing advice from their friends, their colleagues, other business owners. But much like diet advice, I always look at it as, well, they don't know what's good for you. They don't know what your goals are. And it can be dangerous to take advice from other people. The problem is that it's so hard to distinguish good advice from bad advice when it feels like everybody has equal volume to their voice, right? So,
Yeah.
how would you recommend people distill their financial plan simply and make sure that they have covered all their bases?
First of all, you nailed it. There's so much bad information on Twitter, or not Twitter, X, TikTok, all the social media platforms. Like all of a sudden you have this influx of financial influencers, if you will, and some of the information is okay education wise, but some of it's just terrible. So you really have to understand your situation, and with all the information, it's hard to distill like what actually is good and what actually fits into what I'm doing. So that's what I help my clients with, is like they may bring up like, not only am I helping them build a financial plan, right? But I'm also helping them kind of wade through all the information that's out there. So client may see like this cool tax strategy on Facebook or Instagram, and they don't have to go like try to figure it out, or if it makes sense to them, they just bring it to me, and then I say, hey, here's exactly what it is, here's the pros and cons, or hey, this doesn't make sense at all. So it's really like understanding like the type of advice that's right for you through a financial plan, not just like an investment plan itself, because a lot of people get confused with financial planning is just investments when it's a lot more things. I think we'll get into that, what the functions are of that financial plan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go into it. So, when we talk about financial plan versus an investment plan, I think a lot of people can't distinguish between the two. They think financial planning is investing for my future, but it's way more than that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, totally different things, right? So an investment plan is like where you're putting your money in to grow, right? Like a lot of people, like when I start working with someone, they may not have an investment plan, or they may, but really it's like they're just throwing money into this investment with no purpose whatsoever. So in my opinion, you can't actually build a good investment plan without a financial plan in place, because a financial plan is going to direct how you invest in the investment. And that's not just stashing everything in a retirement account, because if you don't know or have a goal or understand what that's for, it's not doing any good. So the financial plan is going to drive all kinds of short-term and long-term decision making, and that's going to direct where the money is going to go for your investments. And that's everything from like midterm investments to your long-term retirement account investments.
So, let's break down the financial plan. What are the elements of a good financial plan?
Yeah, so I use, clients hire me to make things super simple, right? I think a lot of the financial industry kind of hangs on, hey, I need to create complexity to create value for my clients. And then the client has no idea what's going on. And I actually am guilty of that. Like when I first started my firm, like I was diving deep. I felt like I had to kind of do this complex type stuff because that's what people wanted, because that was the sexy, cool, fun thing to do. But in reality, like they want their financial lives simplified. So I try to simplify it down into 4 different areas, and we can talk about each one, but it's really like you have to have some kind of income plan or cash flow plan. And that simply means like cash flow is like a sexy term, right? But cash flow is essentially like what's coming in and what's going out. So you really have to understand like, where are my income sources? So if you're an entrepreneur, you may have multiple income sources. You may have business income, right? You may have a salary from, if you're an S corp, things like that. You have to just understand what you expect that to come in, and then what's going to go out. And then you have to have an investment plan. We can break down each one of these after I briefly talk through them, but then
Yep.
you have to have the investment plan, which we talked about, right? So the cash flow plan, things that come from that plan are going to be funding the investment plan, right? And then you have a tax plan. Like we'll talk deeper into this, but we want to understand our taxes and plan for taxes. That doesn't necessarily mean paying as little as possible every single year, but it's optimizing like lifetime taxes and just being aware of our tax picture. And then
Totally.
finally, to cap it off, like in a financial plan, like you definitely want to make sure that you have the proper insurance in place, like you're protected, because as you're building wealth, you want to protect that wealth. You want to protect your income, like you want to have income protection. You want to have that, which is disability. You want to make sure you have life insurance in place and a good estate plan, liability protected. So those are like the 4 elements: cash flow plan, income plan, investment plan, tax plan, and risk plan that I work through with clients.
Love it. Let's get into, so a cash flow plan and income plan. If I would distill it, sounds like, we need a source of income. We need something to fill the machine. We need an input so we have money to then invest, to plan, and to mitigate risk for, and to
Mhm.
protect. Like, you need something to protect. So that is the input, right? We need some
Yeah.
type of system that's going to generate income for us. And but I want to talk through that and say, let's just talk about a little bit about the sources of income, because I think people are also fixated on, well, I need to make money, therefore I must have active earned income. And that can also be sourced from other places, right? It doesn't have to just be your cash flow plan, doesn't have to be work until you're 70. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, exactly. Like your cash flow plan, like wherever it's come from, you just mentioned earned income, but it doesn't have to be earned income forever. So eventually, like your cash flow plan now might be your active income, which could be the business you have, business ownership. It could be if you're an employee somewhere, it could be your side hustle. It's going to be a combination of all those things. And I mean, if you have a larger portfolio, it could be like portfolio income, right? It could be rental income. But a lot of clients with rentals. So that's your cash flow plan now. But eventually, like your cash flow plan with the proper investment plan, right? Your cash flow plan is going to transition. And this is like where you become really tax efficient is when you can transition that cash flow plan from the investment plan into a cash flow plan that's coming from your investments, right? So
Yes.
the portfolio is now providing income. And that's ultimately the whole goal of this entire plan is like to take your cash flow plan today and then utilize the investment compounding over many years to eventually recreate another cash flow plan for you in the future. And that may be, depending on your assets, that might be traditional retirement age, which for my clients, we don't necessarily look at traditional retirement. We want to provide a ton of flexibility between. So, for example, some kind of flexibility in your 40s or 50s. It's really, and this is where it becomes like where you can't get the advice on social media is the inputs and the planning around that has a ton to do with someone's personal situation. It's like someone may want to continue to work forever, right? Or maybe their business, they have within their business ownership, they operate very little. Like they don't have a lot of things they're doing within their business. So it's almost like passive in itself. So they can do that forever, right? Some people may be very intense in their business. They want to be done by 40. So the plan itself is going to be based on, it's going to be very personalized for that person. But with all my planning, I always like to drive in a little bit of flexibility no matter what, because things change, life is always changing, and we want to have the ability to pivot when we need to.
Yeah, goals will adapt and evolve. I know this firsthand, because if you asked me when I was a young 25-year-old with what are your goals? And I'm like, they're not even, if you asked me then, I don't even remember
Yeah,
what they were, but they're nowhere near what they are at 37. So
yeah,
that will change. And in not in much time, I mean, it's been like 12 years, we'll say, since I was thinking about this stuff after I had started work and I was in my career. And it's like, you really do go through phases of life. And I think that it will definitely change completely over the course of time. But you have to have that adaptability. And I'm so happy you brought that up, because you can plan really far in advance, but so many circumstances will change. I mean, I was
yes,
planning before multiple economic collapses, multiple wars in a sense. It's like you don't know what's going to happen. So you can
exactly.
plan for the future, but you have to be adaptable.
And that brings up the other point of like, well, what's the point of planning anyways if it's all going to change?
Right.
And I try to explain it in the best way. It's like if you don't have a plan and you're just kind of going through life, but you're always going to have something you're driving to get to, right? There's always going to be like a goal. It can be a loose goal, just something you're striving toward. If you don't actually have like a plan on how you're going to make progress towards that, what's going to happen is you're going to continue to drift further from it. And then when you do need to make that pivot or course correction, it's going to be such a large jump that you're going to have to make such a drastic life impact that it's not going to be attainable anymore. So
Yeah.
the plan, a plan is really good in like this year, next year, and maybe next 2 or 3 years, right? That's where we can make like strategic movements from your cash flow to tax planning, making sure things are properly protected. But we want to have like a vision of where we're heading. And then every year, making sure we're on track, what adjustments we need to make. And there will be adjustments to make. Like that's one of the values of a financial planner that I see a lot of value in myself is like talking with clients through these big decisions they're going to make in life. Because little things like, should I buy the daily coffee and all that, like that does not matter with a financial plan. Like who cares? The big things are like, how much home can I afford? Should I buy this car? Like the big expenses throughout life, or when life changes, when someone gets married, has kids, right? just helping them navigate those changes and making sure the plan itself is still making progress to where they want to go. We don't have to be perfect. We just want to make progress.
Yeah, and we have to be moving in some type of direction. I always say that one thing that I see all the time with business owners is aimless planning, like aimless investing or aimless wealth building, where it's, yes, you're building wealth, but to what end? What is the goal? What does good look like? And what types of wealth building you want to pursue? Because they'll generate cash, let's say, and they put it in a high yield savings. So they've got the income side down, but then they don't really have an investment strategy because they haven't thought through how they're going to utilize this money, how they're going to reinvest it, how they're going to use it now versus later. And that lends itself great into a transition to the investment plan. Let's talk about what people associate with an investment plan and then your interpretation of maybe what an investment plan actually is.
Yeah. And I want to touch on what you just said about just holding cash, because I do see that a lot. A lot of business owners, and just in general, people they don't have a plan. Like maybe they're contributing to their 401k or maybe the SEP IRA for a business owner. But then on the outside of that's like just a ton of cash coming in. Where do I put the cash? High yield. And what I find is like a lot of business owners, and this is where the investment plan comes in, is they're very like short term. And you want to be short term as far as your immediate cash needs and liquidity. You want to make sure you have an understanding of what's going to happen next month, next year or so with your cash flow so you can make adjustments and that sort of thing. But that's kind of where things stop, right? So you have the money that's needed in the next year or two, which are like your cash reserves, your comfort level with things. But there could be a lot of cash building up. And it's like, hey, where does it go now? And that's where I have to help business owners like look past the next year or two into the long term and say, hey, how do we start building independence away from the business, right? So whether the business is worth something, it could be a solopreneur and it's just providing income. It's never going to be worth anything. Or maybe a small business that actually has a value. Either way, it's a win for entrepreneurs and small business owners to start creating some kind of independence from the business. And that's how we build the investment plan. It's like, hey, let's look long term as if and start putting this money to work in things outside the business that take less brain power, right? Because you're so focused on the business, and the business is actually the thing that is driving most of the return, right? That's what business owners are good at. That's what they're doing. That should provide the majority of returns. But you have to take some of that money over time and put it into something that is not as attached to the business, that can, what I call, build in a future baseline with your investment portfolio. And that just means like whatever happens to the business, whether it sells one day or doesn't sell or can't sell, you have built in this, you've taken advantage of income and distributions or whatever it might be to build in this future baseline of wealth that you can fall back on or use. And then guess what? If the business sells one day, if it is a sellable business, that can sit on top of what you've already built to create transformational wealth. So really it's a win. And so now we can like back into like the investment plan. What do you want to get into on the investment plan side of things now?
So sorry, my question was, how people normally define an investment plan and then your take on the different elements of a strong investment plan.
Yeah. So what I find a lot of people is like an investment plan is throwing money into, let's call it like a SEP IRA, for example, for business owners, right? That's very, very common one that I see. Throwing money into that and just kind of letting it do its thing, which hopefully the money's invested, right? So you never want to just like sit in cash potentially. I guess there could be some rare circumstances where that might make sense, but making sure it's invested, right? So a lot of people just think, hey, I'm putting money into this retirement account and that's my investment plan. When what I like to do is like, let's create a purpose for that. Like, what are we actually intentionally using that investment account for? Right. So any kind of retirement account, doesn't have to be a SEP IRA. We have to have some kind of goal, right? So retirement accounts to me are like just having some kind of behavioral account that's like a shell that can hold investments, that's tax deferred, and it can provide some kind of future wealth, right? To me, that's within an investment plan of why a retirement plan gets used. But I'm not big on every dollar going into a retirement account. I think, as I mentioned, flexibility. There's other types of accounts out there, like especially like a brokerage account. Big on brokerage accounts and Roths in combination with like pre-tax accounts. In your investment plan, funding the investment plan to create the most flexibility shouldn't be just in a retirement account. It should be span different types of accounts, because those accounts have different kind of tax implications in the future, right? So Roth, pre-tax, and brokerage accounts. And that also creates a ton of flexibility between now. So if you have brokerage accounts, for example, Those can be used at any time. No income limits, no contribution limits, no penalty for taking withdrawals. So it makes things super, super flexible, especially for business owners to have that source of potential liquidity in an account that's not a retirement account. So I think a lot of business owners get caught up in like the retirement plan because that has a tax like a tax benefit usually to it that they can see an immediate benefit. So a lot of them just go to that plan and only use that. When I think your investment plan should be funded with multiple different types of accounts to create the most financial flexibility and tax flexibility.
Yeah, thinking about short term, midterm, long term all at the same time and saying, hey, how much cash do we need right now? How much cash will we need in the next decade or so based on our goals? Like, are we buying a house? We having family? Are we sending junior to college? What are we going
Yeah.
to need? I think that not enough people focus on really kind of figuring out what their cash needs are and backing away from that, backing into that now using the future cash flow. What they're doing is taking the current cash flow and saying, I need to set aside this much of it. And then going, I don't know how much I'm going to have in 10 years. We'll see. And I think that you have to work backwards. Would you agree?
Yeah. If you have certain goals, like education, that's a good one. A lot of parents have that goal, and that can be funded many different ways. Again, that doesn't have to be like a dedicated education account, right? That's where
Right.
most parents just go to like 529. And that's great if you're 100% certain that your child's going to go to a school, right? And you're going to use that money. But you don't have to like jump into that. You can use brokerage accounts and things like that to just build flexibility, but you have to have like some intention for it, right?
Yeah.
And making sure that's going to be funded if that's a high priority goal. If it's a loose goal, you can just fund it through like your general wealth that you're building out, right? But if it's a goal that you want to do in 10 years, it's important to like plug that into the cash flow plan, figure out how much you need to be on track to meet that goal, but also determine where that goal lies in your priorities, right? If it's not your highest priority goal, you want to make sure you can fund the highest priority goals. And then if education is like your third priority, right, and you can't make that happen or can't fully fund that yet, it's okay. You can, make the trade-offs or fund your highest priority goals. And then maybe when things change in the future, you kind of accelerate that goal, right? So really financial planning comes down to like understanding what resources you have and making trade-offs with your goals if you need to make trade-offs, and understanding like how much you need to put towards certain things, certain goals, right? Investment plan for education, for retirement, for just flexibility and things like that.
100%. And that really lends itself well to your next pillars, which are really around taxes and risks. And I want to touch on, people will dismiss the brokerage account and go with the retirement accounts because they look at that as a tax strategy as well. Because brokerage accounts, generally the gains you experience from brokerage accounts, if you take the money out and you've experienced a gain, well, you don't have to take the money out to experience a gain, number one. But if you have a gain from selling your investments, people get a little bit, ooh, because I'm going to get taxed on that. So I think people fear the tax burden of things. I want your take on, mixing strategies and the tax minimization strategy and how it fits in.
Yeah. So mentioning brokerage account. So yes, tax plan is the next important one. And the other thing that like you can't have a tax plan if you don't have a good investment plan and a cash flow plan. Like if you don't understand those things or how they're working together, like you can't have a tax plan because you have to have knowledge of those things to create the tax plan. But as far as the brokerage account, in today's investment like landscape, for lack of a better term, you can build a super, super efficient brokerage account. So yes, there's tax implications. It's not sheltered like a Roth or a pre-tax retirement account. But with the investments that are out there and the investment choices you have and the strategies you can potentially deploy within a brokerage account, you can make it super tax efficient, right? From tax harvesting to tax efficient funds. Because in a brokerage account, essentially you want to place tax efficient funds within that. So if you have like inefficient funds, like things that pay high income or have high turnover, that's going to make your brokerage account incur a lot of taxes. So you can shelter those things by potentially putting the tax inefficient things in your retirement accounts and then the tax efficient things within your brokerage. And that helps shelter the taxes, right? So I wouldn't be discouraged about like in my main message around tax planning is like never make decisions based on taxes, right? Make decisions based on the plan first, then figure out how to optimize taxes. And that goes down to the brokerage account too, because don't shy away from a brokerage account because it can actually provide a ton more flexibility than a retirement account. But don't shy away because it's tax inefficient, because you can make it tax efficient. But in exchange for some of that inefficiency that you might get because it's not tax sheltered, you get a ton of flexibility. So it allows you
Right.
to do more things and maximize your money in a different way outside of retirement accounts.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about how to mix a tax minimization strategy into your overall plan and whether I know a lot of people focus on tax minimization, but let's talk about, how that should fit in and whether that should be the focus.
Yeah, minimization is cool, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like the fun stuff. That's the stuff we want to talk about. But what I find is people get too focused on like, how do I save taxes this year, right? And that drives a lot of people to the wrong types of accounts. For example, the pre-tax retirement accounts, right? If you're only looking at this year and not necessarily looking at like the future year's potential, where you're going to land in a tax bracket and what your lifetime kind of situation is going to be, that can drive you into the wrong type of account, right? So,
Yep.
what was the question one more time?
Tax minimization and
Tax.
how it fits into an overall strategy and how to mix various strategies.
Yeah. So you don't want to focus on like minimizing tax in one year, right? So really, what you want to do is what I found a lot of people kind of get caught up in is like they feel like they may be in like a super low tax bracket, but they haven't actually planned for taxes, so they feel like taxes are like a big burden, right? Because even if you're in like a low tax bracket and you haven't planned taxes all year, and you get to tax time and you have a tax bill, like you're going to feel like you paid a ton in taxes, and then you're going to ask maybe your tax professional, someone, or just look online. How do I minimize taxes? It's going to say put money into a retirement account. And that may be the wrong move because you're in a low bracket. You felt like taxes were a big thing, but you're putting money in the wrong type of account potentially. So you really want to look at like, hey, what am I paying from an effective marginal tax rate, for example, this year? What am I expected to pay next year? What does it look like in the future? Where do I expect tax rates to be? Where do I expect my financial situation to be? And that can kind of help you tax plan around these different types of accounts, especially when we're talking about like Roth versus pre-tax, right? Because Roth may be a better decision now. That may be, because you're in a lower bracket, you may be in a much higher bracket in the future. Or maybe you think, you're going to retire early or sell your business early. And we do a lot of pre-tax now because you're in a high tax bracket. And then you may have some years where you're going to be in a low bracket because you're taking time off and you can do Roth conversions and things like that. So the moral of the tax plan story, and there's a ton of other areas to look at, but just from putting it on top of the investment plan, is you want to just understand your tax picture and understand what you anticipate going forward to be able to make, fund the right types of accounts, for example, within that kind of overlaying the tax plan on the investment plan.
Absolutely. And my take on it too is that, you can't be too short-sighted with the tax minimization because you have to look at, well, there's minimizing taxes this year at the expense of, minimizing taxes next year or the expense of minimizing taxes in the future. So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Me personally, I'll share with you guys, and this isn't investment advice, and we disclaim the crap out of the show. I have a mix of Roth and traditional because I want to almost hedge myself and go, I don't want to completely bank on one type of investment strategy. I want to balance it out and have some tax advantage stuff today because I have certain goals in a certain year to reduce taxes when I have a high bracket, let's just say a high year of income. I might max my traditional and say, great, I get to minimize taxes now. And yes, I will pay later and that's okay. But that because I want the cash flow and I want the ability to reinvest that money that would have been spent on taxes. However, for a long time and still today, I invest in a Roth as well, which means you pay taxes now and it grows tax free till you retire. And a mix of those strategies is also nice because I know that I'm not betting on only one outcome. I'm saying, hey, this is probably what we should be focused on based on my personal goals in any given year, but also keeping in mind the long-term goal as well and knowing how it will impact me.
Yeah, diversification is just as important as asset diversification, right? Everyone's familiar with diversifying between stocks and bonds and having international and US positions to diversify your investments. But it's super important to also have a mix of types of investment accounts for your future tax diversification, right? So Roth and pre-tax are super important in that. And if that's a big question for a lot of people. Should I do pre-tax? Should I do Roth? And there's a lot of areas we can look at to say, hey, this is the one that makes the most sense this year or next year. But if you're uncertain, it doesn't hurt to split the difference, right? Especially if you may land in those like middle area tax brackets for sure. That's a good area to split. Now, if you're in super high tax brackets, a lot of, more decisions are usually made around pre-tax. But again, it's based on someone's goals and what they want to accomplish to determine Roth or pre-tax. But splitting it never hurts.
Exactly. It'll just hedge the decision and make it easier to take action because an invested dollar is better than an uninvested dollar. And if you're stagnant and if you are if entering analysis paralysis, trying to decide between the two, my advice, and I'm comfortable saying this, is if you have to take action, if this is going to hold you back from investing for months, if not years, time is your best friend when it comes to investing. So, split the difference or pick one and go with it. And you can always rebalance it out, and you can always hire people like Travis to help you strategize that going forward. But my biggest thing is take action as soon as possible to act towards this plan and not wait until you know more or you have more insights. I think some of these tried and true methods of simple investing are really not going to steer you wrong.
Yeah, and don't over optimize. Like what you just said, like
Yeah.
people get so caught up on I need to optimize every single dollar. And that can be dangerous, right? That can
Yeah.
just you can do nothing at that point. And don't be afraid to get help either, right? If you need someone to help guide you through it and actually take action on things, that's a big win.
So let's get into protecting what it is that you're building, protecting your plan, protecting your wealth. And as we wrap up here, let's dive into some of the ways that you listed. I know you mentioned insurance, you mentioned a few other things, estate planning. Most people think of financial planning and they don't think of these elements. They think of growth and they think of, expansion and what they're doing over time. But let's talk about planning for the future and how we protect all that.
Yeah, I mean, the most boring part of financial planning is the last piece that we kind of plug in, which is protection, like making sure you're properly covered on everything, especially for entrepreneurs, right? When you're an employee somewhere, you probably have um, disability, which is essentially like protecting your income, right? You have some sort of disability and you get usually some kind of life insurance and you get the whole palette of benefits and all that stuff. But when you're an entrepreneur, especially, you don't have these things. And I even find a lot of these gaps with people that are employees or entrepreneurs. So it doesn't matter, but it's super important part of the plan to have a couple of, and I'll talk a couple of things, right? So like life insurance, right? Life insurance, if you have people that depend on you, is super important. And to make sure you're not way over covered and paying too much or way under covered to where you're going to, create financial instability for someone that depends on you if something were to happen, right? So life insurance is a big one that we definitely cover with a financial plan. That can be a big risk. And I don't want to get too far into it, but to me, there's a lot of stuff out there on social media about life insurance and having cash value life insurance as an investment. And my philosophy is like life insurance should be used to cover a risk. So invest in actual investments, and outside of that, if you need life insurance, that should be used to cover risk only. It's not an investment. So that's one aspect of it. And then income protection, like we want to make sure we're covered on our income, like protected. And that's essentially disability insurance. So I think disability insurance, like the word disability kind of makes a lot of people just like think, oh, that's never going to happen to me. Right. But really, you're just protecting your income. So if you're a high income earner or you're a specialist in something and you have a high income, you want to make sure you're protecting that income with disability insurance. So we make sure people are properly covered with that. And obviously, your liability, making sure you have proper liability on everything. And that's everything from like reviewing auto insurance and home insurance, making sure all that stuff is protected, umbrella insurance, and all that. So you really want to have a good like risk management plan to make sure you're properly covered. And again, I find people a lot of times they're undercovered, but sometimes I find people that are like way overcovered. They have too much insurance. Someone sold them a big insurance policy and it doesn't make a lot of sense for their financial situation. But all that,
Absolutely.
all that's built on the financial plan itself, right? So if you don't have a good income plan, investment plan, and understand your whole entire financial situation, there's no way you can determine how much life insurance or disability insurance that you're going to need.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that holds people back from these types of, I don't want to say investments because I don't want to fool the term here, but like these strategies, if you will, for risk management, one thing that holds people back is I don't have anything to protect, Travis. I don't have that much money and I don't
Yeah.
have any need for that right now. So I'll deal with that later. I'll whatever. I don't have enough to protect. And here's the funny thing. Even people who say that and then they build more wealth because of the perspective they have, we're never satisfied with what we have. Right? We're always a step behind where we want to be. So we'll always tell ourselves the story of, well, I don't have enough to really worry about that yet. And I think that perpetuating that belief is going to be, is going to be damaging to your strategy. Can you just talk a little bit about, for those people who are listening who go, it's too early for me, or I don't have enough money yet? What's your response to that?
For the risk part or for the whole thing?
For mostly for the risk part, because I feel
Okay,
like
risk part.
that's the thing that gets
Yeah.
neglected the most in the early stages because people think they're not ready for that yet.
Yeah, I mean, the couple things to look at there is like, disability is probably the biggest risk to folks that are like just getting started or young. And, you have to have some kind of income to protect. So you may not need it if you don't have a big income, like you're just starting up a business or something. It could be very hard to get some kind of disability insurance. And in life insurance, like one thing, if you have people that depend on you, then you probably need life insurance. Right. Unless you have a ton of assets and you can kind of self-insure a lot of it. Right. But at that point, you're probably needing some kind of permanent life insurance if you're a high net worth individual. So if
Right.
people depend on you, life insurance, you need it. And that just comes down to like a needs analysis on how much do you actually need. And there's tons of calculators out there, and a financial planner should be able to help you out with that as well, like just determining like what the proper amount is going to be. And those are
Absolutely.
like the two kind of cornerstone coverages, like outside of that, like liability. But those are things I would think through. Like everyone needs some kind of protection, and especially as you go through the journey and your wealth building, like it becomes even more important to be able to protect that wealth. But if you're just starting out, like yeah, you may not need some of it, especially if you're an entrepreneur just starting out. It's one of those things where you gotta do what you gotta do. This stuff may not make, like, not every part of the plan may make sense. Like you may just be focused on generating business income, and that's the first thing is you have to get income or nothing else matters.
Absolutely. And I encourage you guys to check out some of the other episodes we have on this too about estate planning and continuity planning and things like that. Because even though you're just starting out, I do believe that you should have something, whether that's a formal plan or not, you should have something in mind as to if something happens to me, what will happen to my business? If something happens to me, what will happen to my family and will they be taken care of? Those are really important things just to consider, even if you don't have a ton of resources at your disposal, having a vision of what you want that to look like so that you're also chasing that as part of your mission as well.
Yep,
I think that's a
exactly.
really important thing.
Yeah, estate plan, having the business included and everything, making sure you have a plan for that, super important.
Yeah, because as soon as you birth the business, it's a business, so it's worth something, and it should be something that you just consider in that overall plan and share with your wealth advisor. As we wrap things up here too, Travis, can you tell people how they can find out more about working with you, more about learning from you?
Yeah, so my firm is Kinetics Financial Planning, and the website is kinetics.com. And if people are interested in like learning more about working with me, you can click on free strategy session, and that will allow you to book a call with me. And we'll talk about your situation, see if you're a good fit. If you're not a good fit, I can line you up with other advisors that may be a better fit for your situation. And if you're a good fit, we'll do a free strategy session to just kind of cover some high level details about your situation, make sure it makes sense for both of us before we move forward. If you want to collaborate on with me or just kind of have conversation, like I'm pretty active on Twitter or X. That's where I do most of my content and things like that. And you can also sign up for my newsletter on there on X as well. And that's where I put out a ton of content pretty much like every day on there.
Awesome. Guys, we'll put all those links in the show notes for you so you can learn more from Travis. Travis, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.